Welcome to another BCS podcast. Today, our very special guest, which is totally different than what we've normally been doing, is Major General Patrick Hamilton. He was the commander of the 36th Infantry Division here out of Austin?
That's correct.
That's correct. All right. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could kind of just elaborate a little bit how you came to BCS and where's your connection with that?
Sure. Years ago, our daughter Jillian was just finishing elementary school in Round Rock, and we've been very active in the community in Round Rock. And we were at a Christmas party. Big Boy Hester has an annual Christmas party, and we weren't really thrilled with the academics and the environment in the public schools, especially as she was getting into middle school. And my wife Beverly asked Reed and Reese Ryan, Nolan Ryan's sons, who we'd worked on some charities with, and their kids had attended Brentwood, and they recommended, hey, why don't you look at Brentwood Christian School? And so we came down here that next week and just fell in love with it and went through the process. And then Jillian, our daughter, came here through middle school and high school.
Okay, great. And you're still involved with the school. So.
Yes, our grandkids now attend here, and our daughter-in-law teaches here.
And that's amazing. We love having her, too. Yeah. This is her first year, so
it is.
Hopefully she's having a great time with those little ones.
She absolutely loves it. Yeah.
I saw them today in the character parade. We have some videos, so maybe I'll show you later. But they all got dressed up and as their book characters. It was pretty cool. I love that we have that tradition here.
That's great. It's a great environment.
Now, getting into your impressive career. I remember when I had lunch with you and Jay not too long ago, and just hearing about your background and where you've served, how long you served. It's just, to me, I've always been a fan. I love the Civil War era. That always interested me. I used to be a U.S. history teacher. And, of course, the Revolutionary War, and then moving through the ranks. My brother was really big on World War II, right, which was a very interesting time in our history. And so taking all of that and thinking about the armed forces, it always makes me wonder, why does somebody want to enter into the armed forces? So what were the reasons that you decided, and when?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know, nor did I ever intend for the military to become what I did. I grew up as an Army brat. I moved 23 times before I left home for college, all over the world with my dad, mom and dad, and his military career. And he had deployed to Vietnam 3 times. And, he had a what I would say is a fairly distinguished military career. I mean, he's kind of my hero, but he never pushed me towards the military. What he did do, and I was in high school in Northern Virginia in the Washington, D.C. area, and I was applying for colleges, and he said, well, I prefer you apply to colleges back in Texas because that's our permanent residence, and I won't have to pay, we can pay in-state tuition there.
Right.
And so I applied to, my dad's an Aggie, by the way. I applied, whoop. I applied to Texas A&M, University of Texas, and Texas Tech. Our family, my mom's side of the family, has a history at Texas Tech. Well, I got accepted to Texas, and then I got accepted to Texas Tech, and then I finally got accepted to Texas A&M. And my dad said, well, where are you going to go? And I'd only been to the campus one time in my whole life that I ever knew. And I said, well, I think I'll go to A&M. And
smart choice.
Yeah, I think, and he said, I think that's a good decision. And I went downstairs and I heard him go whoop upstairs. So, and then he told me, he said, I have one caveat on you going to A&M. I insist that you be in the Corps Cadets your first year. After that, if you don't like it, you don't want to do it, that's fine. But just stick it out your first year. Because I think he recognizes I needed that kind of discipline. And if it hadn't been for the Corps Cadets, I would have never, ever have graduated from college.
What 18-year-old boy needs discipline?
Yeah, well, I did a lot. And so going through the Corps Cadets at A&M, I really loved the structure. I loved the leadership lessons and all of those things. And so I signed a contract to go into the Army. I was going to do one of two things. I was either going to go in the Army or I was going to be a coach. And there's a whole lot to be said about both of those careers. They both have a lot of upside, and very active and stay engaged with people and a lot about leadership. And so I went into the Army, went to my assessment through ROTC at Texas A&M, and the ROTC Advanced Camp at Fort Riley, Kansas, your junior year in college, assesses you while you're going through the 6 weeks of training. And normally, if you have, it's a grading system. If you're a 4 or a 5, you go on active duty, and you go off and you have a career in the military. If you're a 3, it's a guaranteed reserve forces contract. That means you're going to go into the reserves, National Guard or the reserves. And if you have below that, you get recycled because you didn't do very well. Well, there were 8 Aggies in my platoon, and normally they spread the Aggies out amongst the company's much larger formation. So you have 1 Aggie in each platoon usually. Well, we had 8 in one platoon. And our TAC officer brought us into the room and said, guys, you are all above, you're here. The rest of your platoon is down here, but I can't give you all 5s. So we drew out a hat.
Oh, wow.
And I drew a 3. And I was like, well, man, somebody doesn't want me to be on active duty. So having a career as a military officer. And so I got into the National Guard, went to the Cavalry Officer Basic Course at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and fell in love with it, tanks and those things, and was in the 124th Cavalry in Waco, Texas. And opportunity came up to go full-time in the National Guard. And I blinked, and 35 years later, I retired as a 2-star general. And I never intended it to be a career. I just said, when this quits being fun, I'll do something else. But it never quit being fun.
Well, thank you for your service. But I was going to ask, and you kind of touched on that, when did you know, I guess when you were in it, that did you think at some point, well, I'll put in 10 years or I'll put in 20 or, I'd like to retire as a general, or did that even seem at that time attainable?
As a lieutenant at my officer basic course at Fort Knox, there were 300 of us in the class. And our first leadership discussion, a colonel gets up there and he says, everybody look around. Only 4% of you will make major. And of that 4%, only 4% of you will make full colonel. And of that 4%, only 1% might make general. And so the odds were like not even one person in our 300-person class was going to become a general. And so it's one of those things. It's somebody told me one time, and they were very, very right. Colonel is the last rank that you make based on your performance and your potential. To become a general is a lot of timing, luck, being in the right place at the right time in your career, getting the right assignments by being in the right place at the right time. And those are the things that kind of worked out for me.
Very nice. Did you ever serve overseas or?
Many times. The first deployment was in 2000, and we deployed to Bosnia as the 1st National Guard Division to take over command and control of U.S. and international forces in the Balkans since World War II, actually. And that was a kind of proof of principle, because there had been comments that the National Guard really wasn't a viable operational force and those kind of things. And the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Gordon Sullivan, had said, well, the National Guard takes a year to deploy, so they're really not all that relevant. And Mrs. Deborah Lee, who was the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, asked him, he said, what do you base that on, General? And he said, well, just everybody just knows that. And she said, well, let's figure out why. And so she contracted the Institute for Defense Analysis to come in and do a study, and it was our division that was who they studied, of how long it would take to get a full heavy division out the door. And with this new program at the time called Microsoft Project, we tracked every single soldier, individual training, collective training, all the tasks that you have to train to get deployed for combat operations. We had a brigade out the door in 90 days and a division out the door in 6 months. And nobody thought we could do it. And General Shinseki was the G3 of the Army. And nobody could shoot holes in it. And so when that came out, that kind of got a lot of attention. And they said, okay, let's see if they can prove it. And so they said, you guys are in the rotation. You're going to Bosnia.
Uh-oh.
Okay, here we go. And that's one of those places where, as a deployment for me, I was the chief of operations for the division as a major. And we had to be better than any other division on active duty to be good enough. And our division commander, Bob Halverson, recognized that. And when he, we went over there and we knocked it out of the park. I mean, we absolutely excelled in everything, came home, had a great rotation. And that kind of set the stage. We got back in October of 2000. Well, 10 months later, we have 9/11. And now everybody's in the fight. And because of what we had done there, the National Guard became part of the operational force. And, from that point on, and I asked this question at my retirement speech when I retired, a whole auditorium full of people. I said, how many since 9/11 have been deployed once? Every hand went up. Twice, every hand stayed up. 3 times, most of the hands stayed up.
Wow.
4 times, a bunch of hands stayed up, and then a bunch of applause. I said, see, we are part of the operational force every bit as much as the active duty folks are. So that first deployment set the stage, and then after that, I went to Afghanistan for 15 months with the 101st Airborne Division, and then the last deployment was as the commander of the 36th Infantry Division to Kuwait, with my headquarters at Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, and I commanded all of the ground combat forces in 9 countries in the Arabian Peninsula in that area. So.
Wow. I can get into this stuff. I remember going back, maybe 20, 25 years, when I heard about, when after 9/11, like you said, that we were utilizing more of the National Guard. And I always thought, no, I always remember it was the Army, the Navy, the Marines. You don't really call in the National Guard except for domestic things. But it seemed like now anybody that served in the National Guard, they were instead of doing a draft or anything, they were the ones that were going over fighting overseas.
Well, and that's what people don't really know. The Army is made up of 3 components. There's the active Army, the reserves, and the National Guard. The National Guard is a full, probably, I would say, 2/5 of the Army. The reserve is 1/5, and the rest is active Army. So 350,000 plus National Guardsmen,
Wow.
400 and some odd active duty. So and it is a part of the Army, and it's organized just like the Army is, with combat divisions and those things. And so, yeah.
It seemed like they utilized the National Guard more so than the Army. At least that's what my impression was.
It may appear that way. I'd say that's probably not the case, but the challenge with the National Guard is the traditional guardsmen, soldiers, have careers. They have families. They don't live on active duty installations. And for a presidential call-up, they're limited to the amount of time, 12 months, that they can be called up on a presidential call-up.
Right.
So there's a little bit of limitations, but there was a point in time, and I had to get an exception to be called up for a 15-month combat tour in Afghanistan. And so I had a 12-month order, and then I had a 1-day break, and then I had a continuation.
Well, at least you got a break.
Yeah, 1 day. But it was an opportunity to really prove that we're part of the force. And what's interesting is, in the founding of our country, we never intended to have a large standing army. That's why Posse Comitatus exists, because they didn't want a large standing army. They didn't want our military to enforce laws. That was the job of the militias in the states. Well, the militias were unregulated, poorly equipped, depended on what state they were aligned with. There was no consistency. And in 1903, the Dick Act established those militias as part of at the time, the Army, so that they were under Title 32 of the U.S. Code versus Title 10, which is active duty. What that meant is they would be resourced federally for equipment and training. So they're trained to the same Army standard as the rest of the Army. They're equipped the same as the rest of the Army, paid for by the federal government, but under control of the governor. And that's how that was done. And National Guard under Title 32, posse comitatus doesn't apply. So they can enforce laws at the behest of the governor.
Like today.
What's
going on?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, if they're federalized under the Insurrection Act, they can still enforce the law. But that's not what they're doing. What they're doing in today's environment is they can secure federal facilities, which is what they've done on the border. We're securing our border, our international border. They can secure federal facilities, and they can secure federal employees, basically help secure federal employees. So the current environment, you don't see National Guardsmen out going and arresting anybody.
Right.
That is not in their purview. They can, however, protect
federal property
and federal employees. That's the intent.
Okay. So with that, and you have the National Guard. So the National Guard, as you're thinking back, it's called the National Guard, but it's really under the state's control, each state, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
But yet it's called the National Guard because they can be utilized by the federal government? How does I'm just trying to understand the distinction there.
I don't know why they... I think it really became known as the National Guard when it was made part of the Department of the Army, because before that they truly were state militias.
Yeah, exactly.
And so in Texas, it's called the Texas National Guard, Texas Army National Guard. But it is the 36th Infantry Division is a Texas Army National Guard division. Fought in World War I, fought World War II, was formed out of National Guard units. And then I've deployed it as a division commander. Has a very long lineage, and if you look at World War II, when you have to expand the Army very quickly, in World War II they went from less than 1 million people in the Army to 10 million.
Wow.
in about a year and a half to 2 years.
Everybody was trying to get in. My parents, my dad, his brothers,
and so those National Guard divisions were out the door quick, and the 36th Infantry Division, pretty historic of your history of World War II. They did the Louisiana maneuvers in 1940, and the war broke out, and everybody basically stayed on active duty and prepared to go overseas. And the 36th Division went into North Africa early in the war, did not go to Sicily, but then went into as the first combat division in the Army to land on the mainland of the European continent in Salerno in Italy.
Wow.
And fought up the Italian boot. And I've been there actually to all the battle sites. It's fascinating.
My dad is from Salerno. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
it's a great town, by the way. Have you been?
No, my daughter went, and she took pictures of the church where a lot of them got baptized and stuff, but it's a little town called Sassano in Salerno. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, it's fascinating, and to trace the division. There's a book called From Texas to Rome, written by Fred Walker, who was the division commander during that time. It's basically his journal is what it is, and they landed in October of 43 and liberated Rome 10 months later, 2 days before D-Day.
Oh, wow.
And so it didn't get any press.
Press, right.
But they had suffered a 16,000 person division, was what they were organized at the time. They suffered about 8,000 casualties.
Oh, that's a lot.
That they recycled. And yet you don't hear about it.
No.
Had more Medal of Honor recipients than any division in the Army.
Oh, I didn't. See, a fun fact. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So why were you there? Did you get to visit the Amalfi Coast? Or
we did, actually. We went to Paestum is actually where they landed, and we tracked the division's route from there up through San Pietro, and then we took a day and drove over to the Amalfi Coast and hit some of the towns there and came back. But we followed the route of the 36th Division all the way up through San Pietro, Monte Cassino. You've heard of that, the Rapido River. Terrible casualties taken at the Rapido River. Then they got pulled off the line, reconstituted, and then thrown into Anzio. Fought the breakout at Anzio, led the breakout at Anzio, and then liberated Rome.
So Texas was leading the way.
Texas was leading the way.
That's awesome. I mean, all that history, and you're there
Right.
at the time. That must have been pretty interesting just taking all that in.
Yeah, the guide, she has it on her website, Dr. Bacaglia. She is a Italian historian and archaeologist, and she went with us with the tour, and she knows all the places where you can see where there was a headquarters there, and she can outline where it was and whose headquarters it was and which unit it was, and she knows all the units, and it was fascinating to go with her and track all that down. And plus, she also knew all the best restaurants to go to and all those things. But standing on those places, and as a matter of fact, a good friend of mine that I went to A&M with, he and his wife went with us, and we have a picture standing that I edited into the black and white kind of picture in old Greek ruins where the division had set up its headquarters, and there's a picture from World War II of part of the headquarters sitting in those ruins of a Greek building, and then my friend and I took pictures of the exact same place.
Oh wow!
And so we have those side by side.
That's cool. Yeah, you were been there, done that. That's nice. Now I noticed you also had a Bronze Star, right? You were awarded a Bronze Star. What is somebody awarded for our listeners a Bronze Star for?
So it is for exceptional achievement in combat, and that's the caveat. You have to be in combat to get that, and I got that in Afghanistan.
Awesome.
Division commander of the 101st Airborne Division.
That's very impressive. Cool. Now, bringing it back home now domestically, from my understanding, the Texas National Guard had a lot to do at your charge and leading the way for Hurricane Harvey. Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. That's the other part of being in the National Guard, the dual roles of the National Guard in support to their community. And that's what the state really uses them for more than anything else, is supporting for disasters. And at the time, I was a 1-star and was the director of the Joint Staff and the commander of the Domestic Operations Task Force for Texas. And so what that meant is any natural disasters, we supported the Texas Division of Emergency Management with what they call in the emergency response world, emergency support functions. So they have an all hazards plan. They look at it every year. The things that they can't do organically that we can do, we have those roles to fill. A lot of it includes evacuation support, search and rescue, engineering support, running shelters, providing commodities because we have the airlift and all those things during a disaster in concert with the Texas Division of Emergency Management. And so over the 4.5 years I did that, we had the huge wildfires, including the Bastrop Fire.
I remember that.
A lot of support to that. We had 106 fires going all over the state. And then we had the Memorial Day floods right after that. And we literally had aircraft that we took that were dropping buckets of water on fires, dynamically retasked them to go pluck people off rooftops during the Memorial Day floods.
Down in Wimberley, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. Texas, and I had all my counterparts in other states that were going, I don't know how you guys do it.
Wow.
And it's the biggest National Guard in the country, the most number of soldiers. And
Definitely.
So, but what happened was, so at any given time, we're prepared to do response. We always have a response plan for hurricanes. And I was actually in D.C. at the Pentagon having a meeting, and you can't really take your phone in the Pentagon. And if you do, there's not really good service anyway. And so I'd been in a meeting all morning, and I went into the center of the Pentagon, there's a little courtyard there, to make a call. And I had going in that morning, I had known, there's a tropical storm off the coast. It didn't look too bad. It was in August of 17. And, we've got 700 soldiers alerted down in Corpus Christi. We're standing by, but that doesn't look like it's going to be huge. I walk out and make that phone call, probably 4 hours. You need to get back right now. And it's going to be a Cat 5, and it's coming into Port Aransas. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I'm on a plane flying back and hit the ground. And, for the next 30 days, that's all I did was Hurricane Harvey and over 18,000 soldiers, airmen, Marines, Navy, Air Force, from all over the country came in to support Texas from a 300-mile long by 100 miles inland area that we had to support from all the way from Corpus Christi up to Port Arthur.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, you did an amazing job during that time. So many people were rescued. So many issues. I know we vacation every year in Port Aransas, so we know people had property out there, and they were just destroyed. Everything. Yeah. Schools were shut down. Schools were wiped out. It's crazy.
I flew down there the day after landfall, and Harvey was such a unique storm because if it had just hit and just kept going, it would have been bad, but not awful.
But it hovered, right?
It went back out,
back, got more strength,
and then came back in and just hovered over Houston, and dropped 52 inches of rain in 2.5 days, which is nothing's ready for that.
No.
But when I flew down to Port Aransas and that was actually on the dirty side of the storm, the back side, and so all of the 100 and something mile an hour winds came from land, not from the sea, because that storm came around, and it looked like we were flying and everything was green and it looked fine, and then suddenly it looked like wintertime. The trees were mostly gone, no leaves on any trees for about a 30-mile wide stretch as we're flying in a helicopter. And it was one of the most amazing things I think I've ever seen. I was like, wow, somebody turned the color off.
Wow.
Because it just almost looked black and white. And we landed, and one of the things that was amazing to me, and you don't see this everywhere, was how much the communities and organizations within the state, not government organizations, just flooded down there to help. I know that Tyson Foods, I was down there a couple of days later as we were cleaning things up and people were able to start coming back in. They had all of these organizations that you hear about all the time. Tyson's Food parked a reefer truck full of frozen meat. And everybody on the planet, it was probably a mile long, had barbecue pits out and were cooking for all the responders, anybody who needed food. And Tyson said, if you run out, we'll send another one. And they was just cooking meat and cooking food. And it was like the H-E-B, Walmart, everybody. And then the people just flooded down there to help. One other thing that was kind of notable, we had, because Houston has their own government. They're a large city and has a lot of capability. But they asked for 1,000 armed guardsmen to work with DPS to support law enforcement, looting, keep anything that happening. Didn't have a single incident. Our soldiers didn't even have to go do anything. Nobody looted. And Steve McCraw, who was the director of DPS at the time, he and I were going to testify before the legislature. And I said, Steve, why do you think nobody looted or did any of that stuff? He goes, because everybody in Texas has a gun. And I said, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
You start going in to do something stupid, they know that the likelihood is they're going to get stopped. So
right.
It was interesting.
Yeah, that helps. Keep your powder dry. Yes.
Yeah.
So when did you decide it was time to retire, and how did you know? Why didn't you go for the 3-star and the 4-star?
Well, it's one in the National Guard. It's hard to get 3 stars. There are very few of those positions there at the national level. You could go to U.S. Northern Command as a deputy commander. You could be the director of the Army National Guard in the Pentagon. there's only probably 3 or 4 3-star jobs, and which is fine. I don't, you don't necessarily go for that, but I was deployed as the division commander and the commander of Task Force Spartan in the Middle East. I had people say, yeah, if you want to keep going, you can go be the deputy commander at U.S. Forces Command at Fort Bragg, and that's a great way to go, and you can have influences. And I said, I'm almost 60. If I go to Fort Bragg, it's not a promotion. I'm away from my family again for another 2 years. Or I go home and I retire and I spend time with my grandson had been born while I was deployed. I hadn't even met him yet. And Jack, who's going here.
Yeah.
And I said, no, it's time. I said, I don't need to do this anymore. I've 35 years, almost 60 years old. There's more things out there for me to do, and being involved in the community and those kind of things. That and the fact that in 35 years being full-time in the Guard, I spent roughly 9 years away from home. I need to give a little bit back.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah.
Well, so with that, do you still get those phone calls, or, hey, have you ever thought about coming here or contracting here? Or?
Well, and I do. And that's kind of what is good about what I do. I'm still contracted with the Army to be a senior mentor to those guys who are still serving.
Nice.
And it's nice because I can still be around some soldiers and help them, the senior leaders not make the mistakes that I made, and just kind of help them.
You made mistakes?
Plenty.
No.
Everybody does. It's awesome. But I had, it's interesting. One of my senior mentors was Dick Cavazos, who they named Fort Cavazos after, and then didn't. Had been seeing him, been around him many times during my career, and got to know him as a battalion commander when I was right after 9/11. I was at Fort Sam Houston, and he had retired there, and I'd seen him doing what I'm doing now as a senior mentor for exercises and helping commanders get ready. And turns out he and my father had served in Vietnam together, and instantly took a liking to him, and he would actually come into my headquarters at Fort Sam Houston. I had staff meetings on Tuesdays, and he would just walk in the door. I said, "Hey, General," and he said, "Good to see somebody on this post is working today." and he was great. I mean, he was a tremendous mentor, and so I saw what he was giving back, and said that's a great thing.
So you can give back now as well. Full circle.
It is. And having a mentor like him I'm going through these exercises, getting ready for deployments and these kind of things, to have him, pull me aside and say, "Pat, what do you really think you were trying to accomplish with that last directive you gave?" I don't know, sir. So why don't you tell me how I screwed that up, and I'll learn from it. He goes, "Yeah, you may not have wanted to do it that way."
Yeah.
So
well, that's good. So as we start to wrap this up, I can't help but wonder what your thoughts are currently then, now that you're away from it and you're seeing our armed forces today. Are you happy the direction the country's going, and as far as where we are in our military or the National Guard?
Yeah, it's interesting. I get the recent gathering of the generals, and I have a lot of people have called me and said, "Man, what do you think about that?" And I said, we did that every year. I got called to D.C. every year with all the generals, and they put us in a big hotel, which cost a lot of money. This time they went to camp or to Quantico, which didn't cost us a lot of money. The military, the Army for sure, is getting back to the warrior ethos and how we better train, better equip our Army to win in large-scale combat operations. And I think the big lesson coming out of the Ukraine is large-scale combat is awful. We haven't fought large-scale combat. We've been fighting, counterinsurgency operations for 25 years, and we've not fought large-scale combat like they have been fighting, at least early on in the Ukraine. And we need to go back to understanding what that looks like. And that's a lot of what I help teach with is we've started doing these exercises that are more geared towards large scale combat operations, where we have to use doctrinal techniques of massing firepower and effects at the right time and place of our choosing to be victorious on the battlefield and put the enemy in a bad situation, no matter who it is.
Right.
So that we can end up winning. And winning matters. Our last Chief of Staff of the Army, Jim McConville, that was his theme was, hey, guys, winning matters. And it sure does. And so I think the things that they're doing now are much more geared to, if you go back and read Fred Walker's book, From Texas to Rome, the things that they had to go through, landing at Salerno, fighting the German army up the Italian peninsula, that was no kidding large-scale combat operations. And reading books like that, you understand the challenges that those leaders had when they're losing 1,000 guys in a day. You know, we lost, in the 15 months I was in Afghanistan, we lost 244 soldiers. And that was awful. And there was a whole lot of angst about, you know, oh, that's those casualties, that's terrible. I said, do you understand that if we were in a real no kidding shooting war, the number of casualties that you have to deal with? You know, the first Desert Storm sweep around, the left hook around into Iraq, they expected 10,000 casualties. They got 100. And that kind of started becoming the standard and the expectation.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we need to prepare for real combat.
You know, I hate
hopefully we don't do it.
Well, exactly. Yeah. But be prepared and have a better understanding, like you're saying, because, you know, I can't help it. As every time I read through the Old Testament, I just think of all these wars and these battles and how many people were killed in each one of those battles.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's constant. There's no way without the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ, on this planet, you're not going to have peace. And so every country has to prepare themselves because inevitably we always end up in a war.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because some of the notes I had, evil exists in this world. And I think that we are probably the largest counter to evil, true evil. I mean, this is really no kidding Satan-like evil. And it's a small story. When I was in Afghanistan, I saw that firsthand, and I went, that is unbelievably evil. We had worked really hard to get a school up and running in this one community in a province there, and worked with a lot of three-letter agencies and funding, and we got it up and running. They had a school, it was first grade class, first graduation of a first grade class. And the Taliban took a mentally handicapped person, strapped a suicide vest on him, and told him right into the middle of that graduation and killed all those kids.
Jeez.
That is pure evil. And that's the stuff that I know that we're fighting against. And I don't think people understand that sometimes in these wars, there is evil. I mean, look at World War II. There was evil there. I think that exists today. I think we are the ones who are going to fight against that. And the bad thing is sometimes we can't recognize it because they use in the Middle East, they use God as their reason, and they interpret the Quran and the teachings to justify the evil. And that is Satan all day long influencing those people to do evil. And we recognize it.
So yesterday I was looking at some clips of a person I know who's back in, who lives in another country, and basically shared the video of what's happening to the Christians there in Sudan. Yeah. And showed in the last 4 or 5 days, they've been slaughtering thousands and thousands of Christians. And I watched the video and I watched the brutality of what was done to these people just sitting there begging for their lives. And, you know, nobody really wants to put that stuff in your head, but you can't turn away from it because it exists. It's reality. And we need to wake up, which is why we have a military, which is why we have the National Guard. and why this is so important to protect the freedoms and the liberty so that we never have to face something like that.
Right.
There comes a cost at that.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important that we understand just from a purely numbers case, we can't be the world's security force.
Right.
We don't have that.
We don't want to
capacity.
be.
And so we shouldn't.
Right.
And so what we do is, and this was part of what we were doing in the Middle East, my job was to help build our partner capacity with the countries in the Middle East and help them develop a capability to be their own regional security so that we don't have to be there. And that's what I think this administration is really doing well with Ukraine. That's a NATO problem. That's a European problem. We support it, but we don't have to have the United States Army in Ukraine.
Right.
And in the past, I think that was kind of our go-to. Well, let's send the 101st Airborne in, and they'll take care of it. And then we're there for 20 years.
Right. Exactly. $1 trillion later.
Right. And so why don't we just say, okay, NATO, we'll give you some resources, we'll give you some weapons, sell them to the NATO countries. You can give the Ukrainians your one generation ago stuff that we had provided you. And oh, by the way, become responsible for what's happening in your backyard.
Yes.
And I think that's a brilliant, actually, way to go.
Well, one more thing that I would like to address is our kids today. So not every student wants to go on to college. Some students are going to say, hey, I want to go on and maybe a trade school. Yeah. We need, God has wired us all differently. What would you say to those students who might be thinking like what you were, maybe, I'm not sure if I want to do the armed forces. I've been thinking about it. Do you have any words or advice for them thinking about this for their future?
Well, so two things. One, I think that it is important that we teach our youngsters that you have to give back. You have to serve. That doesn't mean you have to serve in the military. You have to serve in your community somehow.
Definitely.
Give back in your community. The military is a way to accomplish that. Plus, in the military, they will train you. They'll certify you. You get leadership lessons. And employers really like hiring. If you only stay 4 years in the Army, you've gotten the discipline part, you've gotten the organizational skills, you've gotten the leadership skills. You almost always are on time, and you're drug-free.
And you wake up early.
Yeah, and it's I think that's a good opportunity for a young person if college isn't what they don't know what they want to do, or they're not sure if they want to go to college or not. I think that either going to a trade school to do something because we need them desperately, or to go into the military, and it allows you to kind of grow up and mature a little bit, and then you get into the world. And businesses love hiring veterans. I mean, you get veteran choices or veteran consideration. Preference, I guess, is the
definitely. When I moved here to Texas in 2014, I remember every application that I ever saw always says, "Are you a veteran?"
Right.
And when you close out your application, so it is important, and people do recognize that, and they know that you gave and you served, and they want to help those individuals who gave some to protect us.
Yeah. Interesting number. If you want to look at statistics, less than 30% of our almost million-man Army are combat troops. That other 70%, mechanics, supply, logisticians, name it, and it's all the stuff that feeds that 30% of the combat force.
The support.
Yeah, and those careers for those folks, they're integral to everything we do in the military, and they will serve in combat zones if we're in combat, and they do those things. You're a soldier first. But
right.
You're gonna, if you're a heavy track mechanic for tanks and armor unit, you come straight off of that and you go to work for Caterpillar or name the company. They would hire you in a minute because you've already been working on heavy equipment.
Yeah, my dream was to be in the Secret Service when I was younger. And so I had two options. Either you had to be at least 2 years, you had to have an AA degree, a minimum. You had to serve at least 2 years on a police department or had served in the military. And I thought serving on a police department would go by quicker because it's only 2 years. I applied for 5 different departments, and it just wasn't in God's plan. I made it to the background interview. I did everything, and when they got back, they just said, nope, thank you for applying, but we're going a different direction. And
Yeah.
just God never wanted to happen. My brother was a cop, 35 years. He said sometimes it's a personality thing. Like, personality, who wouldn't want to hire me as a cop?
Yeah.
I'd be a good cop.
I would tell you, and I've learned this with my daughter, my middle daughter. You talk about God has a plan, and God's got a plan for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
All I would tell somebody is they're trying to figure out what that plan is, and they have failures along the way. If you stay positive and you try hard, somebody's going to keep you around and help you grow. Because I know this from my perspective. You may not be the most technically capable person, but if you have a good attitude and you're always at work on time and you work hard, I will keep you all day long over somebody who's a light, bright, shiny object that kind of shows up late a lot and doesn't,
Exactly.
don't want those folks. I want somebody who has a good attitude, is positive, comes in, tries hard, that I will keep them all day long and provide every opportunity for that person.
That's right. And it's merit-based, and it's proving yourself and discipline.
That's it.
What's interesting about, like, the only reason why I brought up my story is that even though it didn't turn out the way that I had wanted, if I would have went to the military, maybe it would have worked out. But God still had a plan,
Right.
and I didn't see it at the time. But, man, I love what I do now. I look back at my life, I wouldn't have traded for anything.
Yeah, same here. I said during my retirement speech many, many times, God had a plan, because it sure didn't go the way I would have ever thought it would have, by no means.
That's for sure.
At every little turn, I said, well, but God had a plan.
Wow.
And, and now here we are. Things have worked out great. So you got to believe.
Definitely. Well, Major General Patrick Hamilton, thank you so much for coming by today. I appreciate you spending the time. It was a pleasure to have you, and I'd like to have you back and maybe kind of go over some of those stories that you've encountered. I'm sure you got a lot of them.
Sure. Anytime.
Okay. And remember, it's always a great day to be a Brentwood Bear.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, it is.